The little girl ran past her mother, past the woman she hadn't seen in almost 4 years, past everyone standing in that living room, and ran straight into my arms. Please don't let her take me. Her little fingers tightened around my dress. I couldn't breathe. Across the room, her biological mother stood frozen, tears filling her eyes. My husband stared at his daughter as though he couldn't understand what he was seeing, and I understood immediately. This was the moment he had warned me about. The moment I had promised him would never happen. Because when I married him, he made one thing very clear. I was his wife. She was his daughter. And I was never supposed to love her like my own. I had agreed. I had even promised him that I would never try to replace the mother who had left her. I never imagined that one day, I would be standing in our living room with his daughter clinging to me, while her real mother stood only a few feet away. And I certainly never imagined that the little girl would look up at me through her tears and whisper the words that would change all of our lives. Please, Mom, don't leave me. But to understand how we got there, you need to know how I became her stepmother in the first place. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to know which country you're joining us from. If you enjoy emotional Afro-Korean romance stories filled with unforgettable twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. My name is Gwen, and 3 months earlier, I was married to a man who had never loved me. Sang-wook was kind to me. He respected me. He trusted me with his home and, eventually, with his daughter. But he never touched me. Not once. Not even on our wedding night. Because even though I was standing beside him as his wife, his heart had always belonged to another woman, Juanita. The woman who had left him. The woman he had waited years to return to. And I knew it. I knew every time he looked at the old photograph hidden inside his desk. I knew every time he went silent when someone mentioned her name. I knew every night I lay alone in our bed, while the man I loved slept in another room. But I stayed, not because I didn't understand what was happening. I stayed because of a little girl who had slowly become the center of my world. Her name was Purity, and when I first married her father, I promised myself I would never try to become her mother. I had no idea that one day, she would become the only person in that house who loved me without hesitation. Our marriage had started as a simple, painful agreement. Sang-wook was a wealthy, respected Korean architect running his family's firm. But behind his sharp suits and calm composure was a broken man drowning in responsibility. When Juanita walked out 4 years ago, she didn't just leave him. She left a 4-month-old baby girl behind without a single explanation, a note, or a backward glance. For years, Sang-wook tried to do it all alone. But his family pushed, the pressure grew, and eventually, he needed stability in his home. That was where I came in. I was a young woman trying to build a life of my own, working long hours, when my path crossed with Sang-wook's family through a mutual connection. When he proposed the marriage of convenience, he was entirely transparent. I need someone trustworthy, Gwen. He had told me in his low, quiet voice during our first meeting at a quiet restaurant. Someone who can manage the house, someone who can offer stability to my daughter while I handle the business. But I cannot offer you romantic love. My heart is locked in the past, and I won't lie to you. He offered me security, respect, and a place in his life. In return, I was to keep his home in order and care for his daughter. And one more thing, he added, his dark eyes locking onto mine with a cold intensity that sent a chill through me. Purity has suffered enough confusion. Do not try to take her mother's place. Do not push her to call you mom. When, or if, Juanita comes back, I will not have my daughter caught in the middle. I accepted those terms. I told myself it would just be a practical arrangement. I thought I was strong enough to keep my heart protected. I was wrong. The very first night I moved into Sang-wook's massive, modern house, the silence was deafening. Sang-wook escorted me to the guest room down the hall from the master bedroom. He bowed politely, wished me a good night, and closed his door. I sat on the edge of the bed in my quiet new reality, realizing just how lonely this life was going to be. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard a soft, trembling squeak near the hallway. I opened my bedroom door and looked down. Standing under the warm hallway light was little Purity, wearing oversized pink pajamas, clutching a worn teddy bear tightly against her chest. She was 4 years old, with huge, expressive dark eyes and soft curls that framed her little face. She stared at me, completely silent, her big eyes wide with uncertainty. "Hello, little one," I whispered gently, dropping down to my knees so I was at eye level with her. "Are you looking for your dad?" She shook her head slowly. "Did you have a bad dream?" I asked softly, keeping my distance so as not to startle her. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she took 2 cautious steps forward, stopped, and held out her teddy bear. "He lost his shoe," she whispered in a tiny, fragile voice. I looked down at the stuffed bear, noticing its frayed velvet ear and missing button eye. I smiled softly, my heart melting right then and there. "Well, we certainly can't have him walking around without his shoe, can we?" I said gently. "May I help you fix it?" That night, I sat on the carpet in the hallway, pretending to sew an imaginary shoe onto her stuffed bear, while Purity watched me with intense curiosity. When we finished, she let out the smallest, sweetest giggle. Without a word, she stepped closer, rested her heavy little head against my shoulder for just 3 seconds, and then turned and ran back to her room. That was the exact moment I failed my contract. Because despite all the warnings, despite all the rules Sang-wook had set, I fell completely in love with his daughter. Over the next 3 months, our home took on a rhythm of quiet heartbreak and hidden warmth. To the outside world, we were the picture-perfect modern family. Sang-wook was always polite. He made sure I had everything I needed. He paid for whatever I wanted, brought home groceries, and asked about my day over quiet dinners. But every time my hand accidentally brushed against his while passing a plate, he would pull back immediately. Every time I caught him sitting in his study late at night, the dim lamp would illuminate the small silver frame on his desk. The photograph of Juanita laughing on a beach, taken years before she tore his world apart. He was a ghost living in a house of memories, and I was a stranger sharing his last name. I tried to keep my distance from him, focusing all my energy on Purity instead. I cooked her favorite meals. I helped her practice her drawing. I learned how to weave her curls into neat braids every morning before preschool. I never pushed her to call me anything other than Gwen. I respected the boundaries Sang-wook had set, even when it hurt. When she bumped her knee, I kissed it better. When she was afraid of the thunder, I sat by her bed and sang soft, lulling songs until her tiny shoulders relaxed into sleep. Slowly, the quiet, distant little girl began to blossom. She started laughing out loud, running to the front door whenever I came back from grocery shopping, and leaving little colorful drawings on my nightstand. One evening, Sang-wook came home early from the office. He walked down the hallway and stopped at the door of Purity's playroom. I didn't notice him standing there. I was sitting on the floor with paint smeared on my apron, making handprint art with Purity. She was belly laughing, wiping a tiny dab of yellow paint right onto my nose. "Gwen, look! You're a sunflower now," she giggled, clapping her messy hands. I laughed, pulling her into a gentle squeeze. "A sunflower? Then you must be the sunshine." When I looked up, I caught Sang-wook watching us from the doorway. For a brief, split second, his face was soft. The harsh lines around his eyes disappeared, and there was a warmth in his gaze that took my breath away. For one foolish second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see me not just as an agreement, but as a part of his life. But then his eyes shifted to the wall behind me, where a small photo of Juanita holding baby Purity hung in a wooden frame. In an instant, the warmth vanished from his eyes. The cold distance returned like a wall slamming down between us. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Purity, it's almost time for bed," he said, his voice flat and formal. "Gwen, please clean up the paint when you're finished." He turned and walked away into his study, closing the door firmly behind him. My heart sank. The reminder was clear. You are just filling a space. Do not forget your place. That night, after Purity was fast asleep, I walked past Sang-wook's study to return a book to the shelf. The door was slightly cracked open. Sang-wook was sitting at his desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring intensely at the silver photo frame of Juanita. "Why did you leave?" he whispered into the empty room, his voice thick with an unbearable, years-old grief. "You promised you'd come back." Standing in the dark hallway, listening to the man I loved mourn the woman who had abandoned him, a tear slipped down my cheek. I realized then that no matter how much effort I put into this house, no matter how much love I gave his daughter, I would always be living in the shadow of a ghost. I decided right then that I would guard my heart even tighter. I would do my duty, protect purity, and never expect Sang-wook to love me back. I thought I understood the rules of our quiet, painful life. I thought I was prepared for anything. I had no idea that the very next morning, the ghost in the photograph would walk through our front door. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen preparing Purity's favorite pancakes before school, while Sang-wook sat at the dining table, reviewing blueprints over black coffee. Then, the doorbell rang. Sang-wook set his coffee down, his brow furrowing slightly. "Are we expecting a delivery so early?" "No," I replied. "I'll check who it is." I walked down the quiet hallway, unlocked the heavy wooden door, and pulled it open. Standing on the porch was a woman in a cream trench coat. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She was breathtakingly beautiful, carrying an air of quiet, elegant grace. I didn't need an introduction. I knew her face from the silver frame on my husband's desk. It was Juanita. She didn't storm in. She didn't shout. She simply stood there, looking at my simple apron, my quiet presence, and the ring on my finger. "Is Sang-wook home?" Her voice was soft, trembling with what looked like gentle regret. Sang-wook walked into the foyer behind me. The moment he saw her, his coffee cup shattered against the hardwood floor. The calm, composed architect vanished, replaced by a man looking at the only woman he had ever truly loved. "Sang-wook," Juanita whispered, tears pooling in her dark eyes. "I'm so sorry. I was young, overwhelmed, and foolish. I've spent 4 years regretting the day I left you." Sang-wook stepped past me as if I were made of air. His hands shook as he looked at her. 4 years of obsession and heartbreak rushed back in a single second. Juanita didn't look like a villain. To anyone watching, she looked like a remorseful woman seeking forgiveness. But as her eyes swept over the pristine house, the warm scent of breakfast, and the quiet comfort Gwen had built, something subtle shifted in her gaze. Juanita hadn't returned because her maternal instincts had suddenly awakened. She had returned because she heard Sang-wook had moved on. She couldn't stand the thought of another woman occupying the pedestal she had abandoned. "Where is our daughter?" Juanita asked softly. "Please, let me see my baby girl." Sang-wook called Purity down. When the little girl reached the bottom step, Juanita knelt on the rug, extending her hands with a soft, practiced smile. "Look at you. Mommy is so sorry she was away. Come here, sweetie." Purity didn't run into her arms. She stood frozen, looking at the woman she only knew from a dusty photograph. "Don't you remember me?" Juanita asked softly. Purity took a step back, her tiny voice clear and quiet. "I remember you leaving." Juanita's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny crack in her flawless mask. Then Purity turned and sprinted straight past her father and past Juanita, hurling herself into my arms. "Please don't let her take me." I wrapped my arms securely around the trembling child. Purity looked up at me through her tears, whispering the words that shattered the quiet agreement in that room. "Please, Mom, don't leave me." Juanita stood up slowly. Her soft, mournful expression remained, but her eyes locked onto mine with a cold, possessing calculation. Sang-wook looked at me, his voice tight with warning. "Gwen, step back. Give Purity to her mother. She is terrified, Sang-wook," I said firmly, holding Purity tighter. "You can't force her. I am her biological mother," Juanita said gently to Sang-wook, her voice dripping with soft tragedy. "Sang-wook, I didn't realize another woman had taken my place in her heart. Should I just leave again if I'm causing trouble?" That single sentence manipulated Sang-wook completely. The terror of losing Juanita a second time paralyzed him. "No," Sang-wook said immediately. He turned to me, his gaze cold and resolute. "Juanita is staying in the guest room. Gwen, put Purity to bed and come to my study." In the study, the truth was laid bare. "You broke your promise, Gwen." Sang-wook said flatly. You knew what this marriage was. I told you from day one that my heart belonged to Juanita. I never lied to you. I never asked for your heart, Sang-wook, I replied, my voice shaking. But I gave your daughter mine when she had no one. You are letting a ghost walk back in and undo months of peace. She is not a ghost. She is my wife. In every way that mattered to me, Sang-wook said quietly, the painful truth cutting through the room. I love her, Gwen. I have always loved her. I cannot pretend otherwise just because you cared for my house. He didn't claim to love me. He didn't offer fake comfort. He remained completely faithful to his original obsession. Over the next 2 weeks, Juanita systematically reclaimed the house. She didn't do it with loud outbursts. She did it with soft elegance. She sat beside Sang-wook at dinner, laughing softly about shared memories from Paris, brushing her hand against his shoulder, filling the space with her presence. Sang-wook was helpless under her spell. He looked at her with the same starving devotion he had carried for 4 years. Gwen watched from the margins, an outsider in the contract she had signed. Juanita enjoyed every second of it. But once she realized how completely she held Sang-wook in her hands, the thrill of the chase began to fade. She had proven to herself that she could take back what was hers. She didn't actually want the quiet routine of domestic life or the responsibilities of motherhood. She just wanted the victory. One late evening, Juanita met me in the kitchen. You thought you were special because you cooked his meals and raised his child, Juanita said softly, taking a sip of wine. But a man doesn't forget the woman who owns his soul for a woman who simply manages his house. He never loved you, Gwen. I know, I said quietly, looking her in the eyes. He loves a ghost. And one day, he will wake up and realize that the ghost has no substance. The next evening, I packed my bags. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. When Sang-wook walked into my room and saw my suitcases, he looked at me with heavy guilt, holding a settlement envelope. You don't need to pay me off, Sang-wook, I said, stepping past him. I am leaving because my dignity is worth more than being a shadow in your home. Gwen. He hesitated, his voice tight. I am sorry I couldn't give you what you wanted. I never asked you to love me, I replied. I only asked you to protect your daughter. Remember that when the illusion fades. I walked out of the house that night, leaving the contract behind me. 2 weeks later, the illusion collapsed completely. With Gwen gone, there was no one to handle the household, no one to quiet Purity's night terrors, and no one to maintain the peace. Juanita quickly grew bored of playing house. The late-night parties in Gangnam called to her again. She began leaving Purity with hired nannies, staying out until dawn, and dismissing Sang-wook's quiet concerns with cold indifference. The breaking point came when Sang-wook returned home early one afternoon to find Juanita packing her luxury luggage. Where are you going? Sang-wook asked, standing in the doorway of the master bedroom. Juanita paused, looking at him with cool detachment. Back to Europe, Sang-wook. I thought coming back would feel like a grand romance, but this life is suffocating. You are suffocating. Sang-wook stood frozen, the 4-year obsession shattering into dust. You came back, just to leave again? I came back because I wanted to see if you still belonged to me, Juanita said casually, zipping her bag. And you do, but I don't want to be trapped here. She walked out the front door for the second time, leaving Sang-wook alone in the massive, quiet mansion. That night, heavy rain poured over Seoul. Sang-wook stood in the quiet hallway of Purity's room. The little girl was curled inside her closet, holding her teddy bear, refusing to speak, refusing to eat, completely withdrawn from the world. For 4 years, Sang-wook had built his entire life around the memory of a woman who didn't care if his world burned down. In doing so, he had pushed away the only person who had brought genuine warmth, stability, and selfless devotion into his daughter's life. An hour later, a knock echoed at the door of my small, modest apartment on the other side of the city. I opened the door to find Sang-wook standing in the pouring rain, drenched, pale, and completely broken. He didn't kneel and pretend he had secretly loved me all along. He didn't offer me a fake romantic fairy tale. Instead, he looked at me with raw, agonized humility. I was a fool, Gwen. he whispered, his voice cracking under the rain. I spent 4 years worshipping a woman who never cared for me or my child. I sacrificed my daughter's peace and your dignity for a lie. He looked down at his shaking hands. I cannot offer you a heart that was broken and wasted on the wrong person, he said quietly. I will not lie and say I was perfect. But my daughter is wasting away in that house without you. She needs her mother. And I need the strength and truth you brought into my home. Please, come back. Not as my placeholder, but on your own terms. I looked at the man standing in the rain. I didn't throw myself into his arms. I didn't pretend the pain of the past 3 months had magically vanished. I will return for purity, I said, my voice steady and unbreakable. And if I return, things will change. I will legally adopt Purity as her mother. I will build my own life, and you will respect my boundaries. If you want a real marriage with me one day, you will have to rebuild yourself from the ground up and prove that you are worthy of being a father and a partner. Sang-wook bowed his head deeply, tears mixing with the rain. Whatever you ask, Gwen. Whatever you ask. That night, I returned to the mansion, stepping into Purity's room. When the little girl saw me, she ran into my arms, sobbing with relief. Finally safe. Over the next 2 years, our lives didn't follow a simple fairy tale script. Sang-wook didn't instantly become a romantic hero. He had to do the hard, quiet work of healing his own foolishness, learning how to be a real father, and earning my respect day by day. He legally transferred maternal rights to me, threw away the remnants of his past, and supported me as I built my own independent career. Slowly, on a foundation of reality rather than fantasy, a true family was born. Motherhood and self-worth are never defined by being someone's emotional backup plan. Never allow yourself to be a temporary solution for a man who is chasing a ghost. Know your value, hold your boundaries, and compel the world to respect you on your own terms. Thank you for following Gwen, Sang-wook, and Little Purity's story. What did you think of Gwen's choice? Would you have returned on your own terms, or walked away completely? Let us know in the comments below. Like this video, and subscribe for more deep, realistic romantic stories.